Weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK,
Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening. Tonight on Farage, will Labour be any better than the Conservatives if they win the next election, which so many assume? We'll talk about Maine, the second state that has banned Trump from running for president. Is it time the Supreme Court nationally intervened? And on its 25th birthday, at a time just after the death of Jacques Delors, we ask, has the euro been a success? Did the UK perhaps make the Great Escape? But before we do all of those things, let's get the news with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Nigel. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. 4 people are dead after Japan was hit by several earthquakes, resulting in evacuations and tsunami warnings. That's according to Ishikawa authorities. Emergency services have been responding to multiple fires and up to 30 collapsed buildings after a 7.6 magnitude quake hit the centre of the country. Tens of thousands of people have been left without power and evacuation orders remain in place for coastal areas, although all tsunami warnings issued earlier today have been downgraded to an advisory. Smaller tsunami waves have hit the coastline, but no damage has been reported from nuclear power plants along the Sea of Japan. An official from the country's meteorological agency says more earthquakes are expected. A teenage boy who died after being stabbed on New Year's Eve in London has been named as Harry Pittman. The 16-year-old was pronounced dead shortly before midnight in Primrose Hill, a popular viewpoint where families had gathered to watch the fireworks. A male has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is in police custody. Officers have said Primrose Hill was particularly busy at that time of the incident. Baroness Moan's husband says their family has been treated like a punch bag and hung out to dry. Doug Barrymore says it suits the agenda of the government to scapegoat him and his wife. They're being investigated for their involvement in supplying PPE during the pandemic. Lady Moans admitted she lied when denying connections to MedPro, which made profits of £60 million. Labour's called for Lady Moan to be expelled from the House of Lords. The government says it won't comment on any ongoing legal case. Almost 30,000 migrants crossed the Channel to Britain in small boats last year. That's down by almost a third on a number of crossings from 2022, although it's the second largest total since numbers were first published 6 years ago. No attempts to cross the Channel have taken place since mid-December because of bad weather. Thousands gathered on the streets of central London today to ring in the new year with the one and only pop singer Chesney Hawkes greeted spectators along the 2-mile route with dancers and brass bands. Families even witnessed a brief invasion. The 2024 parade, which started in 1987, marched from Green Park to the Palace of Westminster. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nigel.
Good evening and a very happy new year to all of you. Now, we had messages delivered yesterday by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. And the question tonight I want to ask is, can Labour be better than the Conservatives in government? And I say that because Rishi Sunak's list of achievements that he pointed out to us in his New Year's speech didn't impress me. He began by saying we have record funding for the NHS and social care. Well, yes, that's true. The projected budget this year for the NHS alone is £168 billion. But it doesn't matter what you spend if the waiting list is now approaching 8 million people. He then went on to say that schools in England are surging up the global league tables. Well, that's quite a claim. And whilst it's true that from 2008 to 2018 there were improvements in the education system, we've basically marked time since that moment. But the OECD say that across a range of countries, actually, educational standards have gone down. And our maths marking showed the worst results since 2006. He then tells us he's getting the economy growing. Really? It's barely grown at all over the course of the last 6 months, and each revision seems to move the number downwards, which is perhaps why inflation is falling the way that it is, because perhaps we're actually going to go into a recession. But his pledge to cut inflation by half, well, yes, he is achieving that. And then, unbelievably, he talks about the biggest business tax cut in modern British history. That's the couple of pennies off national insurance for employers. This after, in the very same calendar year, he put corporation tax up for every firm, from a local laundrette to big businesses, put it up by 30%. And the tax burden for businesses and for individuals is the highest that it's been for over 70 years. I am absolutely sick to death of hearing this sophistry, sick to death of how disingenuous it seems the Prime Minister and all of his ministers are. They present us with spin, with things that simply are not true. But the question is, would Keir Starmer be any better? Let's take a quick look at Keir Starmer's New Year message.
We're confident we have a plan that can move our country forward, end the cost of living crisis, take back our streets, get the NHS back on its feet, cheaper energy bills for your home, more opportunities for your children. But most of all, I'm ready to renew our politics so it once again serves our country.
Well, some very big claims there from Sir Keir Starmer as to what he's going to do if and when he wins the next general election. And by the way, looking at the polling, nothing is changing. The Conservatives are consistently 18 to 20 points behind. Technically, the election could go until January of next year, but I think it's 95% likely it'll be in this calendar year. In fact, it could even be 50-50 whether they decide to go for a May election, knowing that the legal immigration figures, when they come out, will be even higher than the 745,000 net figure last year. And, of course, once we get good weather, the small boats will start to come again. Well, to discuss all of this, could Keir Starmer do a better job? We have Matthew Lazar, former advisor to Ed Miliband. You know, you worked with Ed Miliband.
I did, yeah.
As leader of the opposition, the big set-piece debates, leaders' debates. I was at a couple of those.
Absolutely, we took you on that, John.
Yeah, and of course, Christmas messages, New Year messages.
Absolutely.
I mean, perhaps I'm being unkind, but Starmer was dressed and gave a style that looked as though he was at a funeral.
I thought it was a bit disappointing after the Christmas message, which I thought was a success. His Christmas message was a little bit religious, and Keir's not a particularly religious person, but it was good to get a nod to the Christmas story and to use that. Yeah. And the Christmas messages are always a bit more, not fun, but they're more interesting because they're not so party political, because people feel they can't be party political on Christmas, you know, released on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
For the New Year's message, you're meant to set the tone for the coming campaign.
Gosh, it's all very depressing then, isn't it?
It didn't, and you know, even Keir's, you know, most ardent supporters, of which I'm broadly one, would say it didn't set the heather alight. And it was, you know, would have been filmed just before Christmas. He looked rather tired. Let's hope he's had a bit of va-va-voom back in him over the festive season, and let's hope that they remember to get some makeup on him next time.
Yeah, they
need to remember the Blair rule: always have makeup.
Yeah, but it wasn't very professional at any level.
I thought it was disappointing, and particularly, I mean, you looked at the 5 pledges there. They're big pledges, but they're taken from his 5 big missions. I mean, we have this war of these, you know, everything has to be done in 5s because that's what the ad men tell you, and you've got the war of the 2 different.
Yeah, and they both do it.
They both do it. Rishi's got 2 sets. He's got his original set and his renewed set. Labour's got its 5 missions, but they are motherhood and apple pie. Because although I don't like to admit it normally, but I will admit, although it wasn't my idea because it was slightly above my pay grade, but I was there when the Ed Stone was unveiled, and I think you have to remember that vague things pledged either on stone or even on pieces of cardboard in your pocket, can be open to ridicule and speculation. You need to make it clear and a clear retail.
Well, there was no Ed Stone, but I mean...
Yeah, so let's be thankful for small mercies.
But let's have a look at some of these promises. To end the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
How the hell is he going to do that?
Well, I think, by restoring economic growth, I think is their principal way of doing it. But to me, the problem with using that as such a broad brush promise is it seems such a vast thing to achieve without any detail about how you're going to achieve it. My worry about these is I'm old enough to remember, older than I look, Nigel, the Blair Pledge card from 1997, which, you know, both Tony and famously John Prescott used to nip it out at the drop of a hat, used to get out. And that was very, very clear. It was things like, you know, the number of kids in a school class, the extra nursery places that would be available. Now then, you can test whether they happened
specific
or not.
Targets.
They were very specific targets. End the cost of living crisis.
It's very broad and somehow kind of almost beyond what a Prime Minister...
Yeah, and also, of course, I wouldn't be...
Because there are global events.
There are global events, and also the one thing that the Tories have done, frankly, through no thanks to themselves, is meet their inflation targets. So I think we might be slightly not moving out of the cost of living crisis in terms of how households are feeling it, but in terms of it being such an obvious...
Well, inflation coming down, interest rates looking toppy. This may not be
and we may get some interest rate cuts, which is may help determine...
I wish the Bank of England would, but it's a separate...
Absolutely, so do I. I'm on a tracker, Nigel. Tell me about it.
Worst governor of the Bank of England ever, but it's a separate debate.
I think I agree with you on that.
Come back for that one.
I will.
A Blairite message in there.
Yeah.
Take back our streets. This is a right-wing Labour leader that's going to take back our streets.
Yeah, well, even my leader, who wasn't the most right-wing Labour leader in history, we had a policy to abolish police and crime commissioners, which are complete and utter waste of time, energy, effort and money, and spend that on extra neighbourhood policing. So, I mean...
at least we can vote for them.
Yeah, you can, but then, never mind finding out who your local MP is when you go and do a survey. Try finding out who your local police and crime commissioner is.
I take that point.
And also, I was on debating on this channel, for example, the silly things they do, like those non-crime hate crime incidents that they lodge. They don't seem to stand up for that, even if they're, claim that they're common sense. So,
but again,
it's about getting police back on the street.
The Conservatives cut police numbers.
They certainly did,
but they replaced them.
But they're still lower per capita. Because population's growing.
Well, we'll come to that in a moment. We'll come to that in a moment.
I'm taking it head on.
Take back our streets. Blairite sounding. Being tough. The one that really made me annoyed, cheaper energy. This is a Labour leader committed to massive increases in subsidies given to wind energy, all of which goes on people's electricity bills.
Well, so this is was their big plan of 18 months ago, the conference before last, the conference of 2022, which was the beginning of the sort of people taking a serious look at him, which is this GB energy plan to effectively to sort of have a national player in clean energy that will bring people's bills down. What worries me about the way they phrased it is it isn't an easy win. It's not like the original proposals last year, whenever we were in the total peak of the energy crisis, when it was, here's 500 quid off your bills, which was a clear Labour sell. I remember being in the Wakefield by-election knocking on doors, and there was a clear retail offer. You could put a leaflet through and say, here's what we're saying off your energy bills, and here's how it's going to be paid for. This is a much, much more nebulous concept. Trying to sell that on a doorstep in 2 sentences isn't
if they're going to put 28 billion, if they're going to put 28 billion a year into renewable energy, we will not have cheaper bills, is the point that I'm trying to make.
I think the idea is that comes from borrowing and not from energy bills, as part of the Green New Deal, to echo what Biden's doing, so we don't get left behind. But it's not an easy sell, Nigel. I'm not going to...
Exploding population, 10 million, maybe 12 million population growth since Mr Blair came to power. Both parties appear to be terribly relaxed about it. Increasingly, the British public are becoming less relaxed about it. When it comes to immigration...
Pretty mildly, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very, very big issue.
Absolutely. My colleagues in the Red Wall will, have got the scars on their back. He's got the P45s that they got.
What's he got to say?
So, look, I actually think that Labour's offer on migration, which, it's perfectly happy to challenge it, but I think Labour does have, on illegal migration in particular, a set of policies that it can sell. Smashing the gangs by using anti-terrorism legislation, which the Tories haven't done. They have had the opportunity to do it. They haven't done it. It's a tough policy. It plays into the narrative.
Tough smashing the gangs in France and Belgium, isn't it?
It is, but there are things that can be done. Using anti-terror legislation is one of them. I don't think it's a magic wand, but I think it would be a step in the right direction. The Tories haven't done it, and it gives them a clear wedge issue. But on legal migration, that, I think, as you say, is going to be the really interesting thing for Labour over the next few months. Darren Jones, who's now the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, who's the rising star of the sort of Labour moderates, the sort of the next West Streeting, as it were. Yeah. He went on telly just before Christmas, and without, I think, checking with anybody, committed Labour to getting it down to hundreds of thousands.
I know.
He was then silenced.
Well,
I think that's going to be the big issue.
Maybe it won't matter.
Is there going to be pressure on Labour to put a figure on legal migration?
After all, the Tories promised him 4 successive elections.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands,
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Matthew, thank you.
It's always a pleasure. And Happy New Year to you and everyone at home.
And they're very broad brush, and I think to be believable, he's going to have to give a lot more detail.
I think we're going to need some more detail, but presumably there'll be a big New Year's speech in about 10 days' time to hopefully put a bit of flesh on those bones.
Well, one person who did make a big announcement just after Christmas was the Home Secretary, James Cleverly. Yes, he's apparently very clever and represents a seat called Braintree. But this was the tweet that he put out. Well, it says, there were no small boat arrivals over Christmas for the first time since they started in 2018. Last night, our Border Force officers and their French partners worked together to stop a boat launching on the beaches. They've played a crucial role in cutting crossings by 35%. A rather boastful Home Secretary. This was my response. Now, it is a bit sulphurous from me, but I was jolly angry. You may be called Cleverly, but you're clearly a moron. I'm close to Dover now. The wind has been gusting at 50 miles an hour. That is why there are no migrant crossings. You charlatans and liars all deserve to lose your seats at the election. All right, I admit it wasn't very much the spirit of Christmas, but I'm so blooming angry. I've had enough of these people. Rishi Sunak said he would stop the boats. And now they're boasting the numbers are down by 35%. Why are the numbers down? 3 reasons. Number 1, we've returned to some degree of sanity with Albania. Number 2, the hundreds of millions we've given the French, and have promised the hundreds of millions more to give them, have been to some extent effective on the beaches. And number 3, the weather has been awful for much of this year in the English Channel, and that is the biggest factor, I can promise you, of all. But if I'd said to you 5 years ago that over 30,000 people, and it is over 30,000 because those numbers we saw today don't include anybody under the age of 18. If I'd said to you 5 years ago that over 25,000 young men of fighting age who cannot produce identity documents, whose backgrounds, involvement in wars in Syria or elsewhere, we do not know, some of whom will pose a threat to stability in this country. If I told you over 25,000 of them would cross the English Channel in small dinghies, you wouldn't have believed me. And if the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister can hold this up as a triumph, well, I tell you what, they've probably got bigger electoral problems than they even imagine themselves. In a moment, we'll talk about somebody else with electoral problems so serious that a second state has said Donald Trump can't even be on the ballot paper. I'll be joined by former Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski. Surely the US Supreme Court must do something, and soon. I didn't.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So I asked you, will Labour govern better than the Conservatives? I have to say, for my money, I think they're really rather similar. Maybe Labour will be marginally worse. I don't know. Some of your thoughts coming in. Steve says, a terrifying thought for 2024. By illness or mishap, we could see Angela Rayner as our acting PM dealing with world leaders and our economy. Dennis says, no, Labour will probably do worse. We need a new party in this country. Really interesting, Dennis, on all the polling that's being done. You know, up to a third of people are saying they're just not sure and they wouldn't mind having some form of alternative. Can Starmer do better? Asks Patricia herself. A big fat no, he can't. No confidence from Patricia. And Gabby finally says, I guess what I really think. Labour and Conservative parties are the same. No difference in policies. High taxes, high immigration, etc. We actually need change. We need a party that put Britain first in economy, education and health. And Gabby, I agree with that. The problem is we have an electoral system that makes it very, very difficult to achieve that. Now, let us go across the pond and see what is going on, because, of course, 2024 will be a big year in this country. In America, it'll be even bigger because America is the leader. The American president is the leader of the free world. And, of course, Donald Trump is now, if you look at the prices in British bookmaking shops, and the bookies get this stuff right normally, Trump is now very, very clearly the favourite over Biden, or indeed any other Democrat, to win the presidency in November 2024. But of course, he has to actually be on the ballot paper. And following on from Colorado, Maine have decided that Donald Trump cannot be on the ballot, not just in November 2024, but also in the primaries. And the season for that kicks off pretty quickly. Now, it seems to me that the US Supreme Court ought to be acting on this and doing so pretty damn quickly. The last time this happened was in 1860. Yep, it really was. That's when a president was kept off the ballot paper. In fact, 10 southern states kept Abraham Lincoln off the ballot paper, but he still managed to win. But that was America heading towards a catastrophic civil war. Surely modern-day America can do better. Let's get the reaction of Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. Corey, Happy New Year to you. Thank you for coming back on with me at GB News.
Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me.
Corey, I mean, it seems almost to us extraordinary that whether you like or dislike Donald Trump, that the 14th Amendment, something that was designed to stop Civil War leaders on the losing side in the 1860s, that somehow, Supreme Courts in 2 states can decide that somehow it's acceptable to stop Donald Trump from being a candidate. I mean, are these people losing their minds?
Nigel, these are self-aggrandizing liberals who are so afraid that when Donald Trump is on the ballot, he's going to destroy Joe Biden. They're so fearful that Donald Trump is going to become the 47th president of the United States that they've taken it upon themselves. Unelected bureaucrats, really. In the Supreme Court case in Colorado, those people are appointed by a Democrat judge. Yeah. In the state of Maine, the Secretary of State is not elected by the people. She is actually elected by the legislature. So it's not like she went in with this mandate of going to make change. She single-handedly determined that Donald Trump, although he has never been charged, let alone convicted of the crime of insurrection, has committed an insurrection back in January the 6th. And so she is determined that he will not be eligible to be on the ballot in Maine. The Supreme Court must weigh in on this immediately, and they should be completely unified. It's impossible to have a case where a person's never been charged, let alone convicted, and then have them removed or not access to the ballot. That is the disenfranchisement by definition of what the Democrats supposedly rail against, but they are the biggest perpetrator of that.
Biden always goes on about American democracy and how important it is, and yet doesn't seem to want to say anything about these judgments. But what worries me, Corey, is I'm not hearing any noises coming out of the Supreme Court. I'm not hearing they're going to sit tomorrow and deliberate on this. They seem to be dragging their feet.
Well, Nigel, the worst part is just last night on Sunday, Chief Justice Roberts wrote his end of the year soliloquy and never even mentioned this case, didn't mention anything other than really AI or artificial intelligence and the possibilities and problems associated with that going forward. Never mentioned the Donald Trump case. And look, I think this is a seminal case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, maybe the biggest case that has been decided in the history of the court to potentially prevent an American citizen who has been convicted of no crimes from running for office is a very dangerous precedent. And if the court listens to this, and I believe Colorado has cert to have this heard, and they don't speak in a unified tone, the left will use this as a dog whistle, and they will say that this is the conservatives on the court just trying to get Donald Trump back in. The fact is the American people should have a say of who they elect president.
Yeah, absolutely. The American people should reject Donald Trump or accept Donald Trump, not highly politicized judges. And one day we'll have a broader debate about the politicization of that judiciary, but not right now. Now, Corey, you're still on very good terms with the 45th, and he hopes to be the 47th president. Let me ask you, have you seen him recently, and how do you think he's going to react to all of this?
Well, I've had the privilege to spend time with him. He's been in New Hampshire, my home state, campaigning a lot with a first-in-the-nation primary. Our election here is on January 23rd. So in just 3 weeks from today, we'll have an election. And so 3 weeks from tomorrow. So, I've had the chance to spend time with him. He and I were in what they call the Beast just 2 weeks ago together, just he and I talking about how things are playing out. I think Donald Trump is more emboldened than ever to fight for the American people, not because he needs personal wealth or recognition, because he knows if he doesn't do it, our country cannot sustain the opportunities to give to the next generation. We have seen what in 3 short years the Biden administration has done, and we've got an immigration system which is fundamentally broken. We need Donald Trump back in office. He's ready for that fight. He's chosen that fight. And Nigel, I'll tell you, when I was with him on that Saturday 2 weeks ago, he woke up in Florida. He flew to New Hampshire. He spoke for an hour and a half. He got on a plane. He flew to Nevada, went to the fights that night, and finished at 1 o'clock in the morning Nevada time, which is 4 o'clock in the morning East Coast time. And then he got up the next morning and did it all over again. The guy is an animal. He's a beast. He wants this fight, and I cannot wait to take it right to Joe Biden.
Yeah, no, Corrie, he has the constitution of an ox. And I did say to him once personally, he's the only person I know that makes me feel like an introvert. I mean, he is an extraordinary guy. Now, Iowa, you mentioned New Hampshire, the state you're living in, but Iowa is of more significance. There's still quite a big field of candidates for the Republican nomination. I'm going to be in Iowa in a couple of weeks' time and hope to see you there. Is it possible that Trump delivers the knockout blow in Iowa?
Well, I'm going to Iowa tomorrow morning, and I'm going to see on the ground firsthand what's going on. And I was there in 2016. I caucused at the caucus events in 2020 for then President Trump. Look, here's the way our system's going to work. Donald Trump is going to win Iowa. He's got about a 35-point lead over Ron DeSantis, who is still technically in second place, but he's polling around 18%. Then Trump's going to come to New Hampshire, and he's going to win here, and Nikki Haley will probably finish second. This race is over when Donald Trump makes it to South Carolina, which is the 4th state following Nevada. Once that happens and Donald Trump has secured wins in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and then South Carolina, the race is over. We go to Super Tuesday, and by the first week of March, statistically speaking, Donald Trump will have secured enough delegates to be the de facto nominee. He will be ready to beat Joe Biden. And this race is, look, Nigel, the race is almost over now. You have to play it out. And the Trump team has done a phenomenal job in Iowa of coordinating and getting those caucus captains and those individuals ready to commit to caucus for Trump. He's going to be there Friday. I'm going to be there Tuesday, Wednesday. Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming. It is going to inundate the people of Iowa so they understand what's at stake here.
No, well, by March the 5th, Super Tuesday, it will, as you say, all be over. There'll then be more speculation as to who is actually going to run for the Democrats. Corrie, thanks for joining us. Happy New Year. I'll see you in Iowa in just a few days' time. Thank you.
You bet.
In just a moment, some really dark deeds. Polish state media raided by the police at the behest of the new Prime Minister, Donald Tusk. We'll also look at the darts sensation, Luke Littler. I'll be joined by darts legend Bobby George to talk about that. And a really strong statement today by Doug Barrowman, the husband of Michelle Mone. And I'm beginning to think maybe the government has got more questions to answer over PPE procurement than Baroness Mone. All of that in just a second.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
For several years now, the European Union, based in Brussels, has been on the case of Poland. They've accused the last Polish government of stuffing the media with their allies, of making unwise judicial appointments, and indeed, sanctions have been threatened again and again against Poland. But at the last election, the last general election, Donald Tusk, of course, the former boss of the European Council, became the Polish Prime Minister again. And it didn't take very long for police armed with truncheons to raid state media. TVP is the TV station, Polski Radio is the radio station. There was also a news agency, and literally on the most watched TV station in Poland, the cameras literally went blank. Well, it's revenge of a kind, I guess, for Donald Tusk. What astonishes me is how little coverage this has had in mainstream media. Now, Dominik Jasinski is a member of the European Parliament for the Law and Justice Party in Poland. He's been with me before in the studio, but today he joins me from Warsaw. Now, Dominik, a Happy New Year, if I can say that to you. I know you're...
Happy New Year to you, Nigel.
I know you're not in the best of moods about what's going on.
No, sorry, I am not. I'd like to celebrate New Year, but there is nothing to celebrate in Poland. I am in the Polish parliament at the moment. I'd love to be with my friends, with my family, but there is nothing to celebrate. We have to protest, we have to react, we have to shout and scream about what is going on in beautiful, safe, so far, Poland. You see, you are the only one who contacted me to discuss this crisis, this rape, and I'm using word rape because this is rape on freedom, and we are not a banana republic. No one would expect that in this beautiful European Union, full of beautiful words about freedom of speech, about democracy, about the rule of law, and the rest of it, Donald Tusk, a golden child of this Brussels elites, would do what he did, and this is unspeakable.
Dominik, I'm not surprised that I'm the only UK media or even EU media outlet that's spoken to you.
Thank you, GB News. You are the real, genuine. I'm really, really thankful because no one is interested.
However, no, to close down state media, to put it into liquidation, to take it off air is extraordinary. They could have, of course, just gently replaced some personnel. Final thought on this. Do they have some justification in saying that when your party...
No, not at all.
Hang on. That when your party was in power that you stuffed the organisation with your own supporters?
No, it is not true. That's number one. By the numbers, you can tell who was hired. But even if that would be a case, you cannot use physical force against the media workers, journalists, and MPs. One of our MPs, female MPs, was brutally bitten, actually, and she is hurt.
No.
You cannot use private security company to get rid of people who are protesting and MPs. This is not a banana republic, and this is what Tusk did. He cut off the signal, which never happened, never ever happened in the history of Poland, apart from martial law times during the communism. He behaves like a communist.
Well,
we never
actually,
did,
Dominic, you say that Poland is not a banana republic, but the way Tusk has behaved in the last couple of days makes me seriously question that. Thank you for coming on.
This makes our country look like a banana republic, actually,
and we will,
because he's the banana king.
We will, thank you, and we will go to Donald Tusk's government and we'll ask them for a statement on this too. This is extraordinary. Now, it's been pantomime season, and what better villain could there possibly be than Baroness Michelle Mone? She admitted that she lied to the public about whether her family had an involvement in a firm called PPE MedPro, and to lie to the media on something as important as that is not very clever. However, her husband, Doug Barrowman, who really was the investor behind PPE MedPro, the firm that produced PPE for the government, has put out a big personal statement today. In it, he says one or two very interesting things. We've been accused of going through the high priority lane, but he makes the point 51 other suppliers went through that lane and got contracts valued up to £3.8 billion. So it wasn't just Michelle Mone who used it, and indeed there was one or two quite prominent cabinet ministers, friends of theirs, did get big contracts. He also makes the point there are 176 disputed contracts to the value of 2.7 billion, including people who took government money, ran away with the money and never ever produced any PPE. And whilst this may have now been referred to the National Crime Agency, he makes the point that actually he was told by a senior civil servant that if he paid back some money, they'd call the dogs off. These are all quite serious charges. And if what Doug Barrowman says in this statement is true, I'm beginning to feel it's actually the government that have got more questions to answer than Baroness Mone. Yes, she lied to the media, should never have done that. But the facts here are that nearly £9 billion worth of PPE was over-ordered. These idiots ordered 5 years' worth of PPE when they should have only ordered a few months' worth. £9 billion of our money, literally gone. And the so-called inquiry into COVID will not discuss PPE until the spring of 2025. I tell you what, folks, this must be brought to the inquiry. We must know the truth before we vote at the next general election. And I'm beginning to think, as I say, the government, or the last government, have more questions to answer than Mone and Barrowman. That's the way I'm thinking right now. Now, what a sensation, what a story. Luke Littler, 16 years old. Now, he isn't very little, and he looks older than 16, but he really is 16. Won again today. He's through to the semi-finals of the PDC World Darts Championship. It seems incredible. Well, let's talk to a man who could throw a pretty mean arrow in his day, and I no doubt still can. Legendary darts player, Bobby George. Bobby, welcome back on the programme. Good to see you, mate. This guy, he's just come out of nowhere, hasn't he?
Well, obviously, he's played in the youth. He's played since he was, I don't know, 3 years old. He's played in the youth, the double.
Oh, I don't believe it.
He worked hard at his game, won the Youth World Championship, won that, and that gives him a right to go in the Men's World Championship. Now, when I first see him play, I thought, OK, he's a good player, you know, a short format, and then a short format, and then a longer format, and then best of fight. He's unbelievable. The kid's unbelievable. I mean, 16-year-old to get up there with all that crowd, all that pressure on him, and to play darts, well, there's no pressure on him because he don't know the pressure yet. He just plays like he's in his front room, most probably. But he's youth world champion, and he's a very, very, very good player. But what I like about him, he scores well, he hits the shots, he goes for the shots to leave a shot, to get a shot. He looks where he's throwing, and he's throws where he's looking. And that's what he's got to do.
Now, he's obviously done amazingly well with the media, the publicity, the pressure. I mean, is it possible this 16-year-old can go on to win? Is it possible?
Nigel, if you're in it, you can win it. Is that politics for you or what?
I tell you what,
you
Bobby, that's life.
Obviously.
That's like, you should be a philosopher, not a darts player.
Hey?
I said you should be a philosopher, not a darts player, because you're dead right.
I was like you, Nigel.
Bobby George, absolute pleasure.
The thing is with the young boy, as long as you don't push him too much, let him do his own thing, let him play darts, don't keep saying he's going to win, he's going to do that. He's got all the ability, he plays magic darts, he can count, brilliant. He's a pleasure to watch for a young man. Not only that, it's good for all the youth players around the world.
Absolutely.
Well, if I can do it, so it's great for the game.
It's great for the game, and we're all going to be watching. Bobby, come back and talk to us again very, very soon. Thank you. Well, as Bobby says, you've got to be in it to win it. Over the last few days, we saw the death, aged 98, of Jacques Delors. He was the visionary, really, that pushed what became the Euro. 25 years on from its launch, has it been a success or a failure? And did we have a great escape? The Euro at 25 in just a moment.
...2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Jacques Delors was a towering political figure, and he ran the European Commission for 10 years, of course, never having to trouble the voters of Europe. Goodness gracious me, no. I regret slightly that I missed him in the European Parliament by a few years. I'd have enjoyed doing battle, but there's no doubt he was the one who very publicly sold the vision of the euro. Well, as today marks 25 years since it was formally introduced, it's a good moment to ask whether it's been a success or a failure. And to debate that, I have with me in the studio from the Daily Telegraph, Matthew Lynn, financial columnist, and from the London School of Economics down the line, Professor Ian Begg. Gentlemen, I can quite see, from Germany's perspective, why 25 years on the euro has been rather a success. But I look at countries like Italy and even worse, Greece, and see them being trapped in a currency, having lost control of their interest rates. I wonder, Professor Begg, for the Mediterranean, it's not been a great success, has it?
I think there's not been economic success in these countries during the period of the euro, but it can be a mistake to say it's because of the euro. And therefore, you've got to look at what would happen in the absence of adhering to the single currency. And already by the time the euro was launched, Italy was embarking on a period of stagnation because certain persons such as Silvio Berlusconi were running the country in a way which was not conducive to better economic performance. In Greece, they had a period of success up to about 2004, but then it went from success to excess, and they were borrowing far too much. They had a huge balance of payments problem. Again, it's very difficult to say that's a direct cause of being directly caused by the euro. Instead, it's associated with the euro. And I think that distinction is critical in trying to understand whether or not the euro is a success or not.
I understand that point. However, countries like Greece were given completely the wrong interest rate when they joined the currency, lost control of interest rates. And I just wonder about the sort of democratic element of this. I mean, we're used to the idea that we vote for governments in our nation states and they tell us what their economic policies are going to be. Somehow with the euro, don't nations lose a huge chunk of their democratic rights?
They lose control over monetary policy. That's unambiguous. That's the whole point of joining a single currency. But let's not forget, it was a Greek government and an Italian government that were desperate to get into the euro. They were elected on a mandate of joining the euro. So to say that somehow the fact that they joined and found it was not as easy to run their countries when they had a separate monetary policy is making a different point.
Okay, I get the point. Matthew Lynn, to me, I mean, I completely take Ian's point that Italy was entering a stagnant period and was coping with, using lira devaluation as a way of dealing with things. But I mean, do you see this as an economic success? Do you see the Eurozone as an economic powerhouse in the world?
Definitely not. I mean, I think, I respect what the professor was just saying there, but, I think if you go back 25 years, and it's making us feel a little bit old, isn't it? 25 years, quite already. How time flies when you're having fun. But anyway, when it was launched, there were two big claims made for the euro. The first one was that it would challenge the dollar. And that was a very
reserve currency.
That it would overtake the dollar as a global trading currency, the reserve currency. You go out, you're Malaysian, you're Thai, you'd be paying for your oil or ship cargo in euros rather than dollars, and that would have significant economic benefits. And two, that it would make Europe more prosperous, that it would turbocharge growth. You'd have deeper capital markets, you'd have more competition, you'd have fewer transaction costs, all the rest of it. And these were the big claims. So, 25 years is kind of enough time to measure the success of anything, isn't it? So on the first one, challenging the dollar, not even close. I mean, I looked it up 2 or 3 years ago. The share of global reserves of the euro is actually less than the old Deutschmark used to be before they got rid of it. So it just hasn't even begun to challenge the dominance of the dollar. In terms of making Europe more prosperous, absolutely not. It's rough. It's probably not a coincidence that Europe's relative underperformance vis-à-vis the US, which used to be roughly equal for most of the post-war period, started with the launch of the euro.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Begg, again, we can apply the same argument, I guess, that, maybe these things would have happened with or without the euro. Professor Begg, are you still there? Just a final thought from you, though. We had a huge debate in this country on whether we should join the euro or not. Tony Blair made that pledge of a referendum before we joined, and he never dared hold it. Has not joining the euro been a great escape for us?
It's been something of an escape because we were the least good fit for the euro. The studies done, particularly by Gordon Brown when he was Chancellor, showed that in a number of criteria, we didn't fit very well with the euro. So in that sense, yes, it was correct not to go in at the time. Curiously, the Swedes are the other country which did a major study of hundreds of components of this, and they too have opted not to join. But for the others, I think you can't ignore the political dimension of creating the euro. It was a pact, in a sense, between France and Germany, unification for single currency. And that political dimension is very often neglected when we say it's been a failure or not the success it could have been.
I agree with that 100%.
Look at that.
I agree with you 100%. It was always far more political than it was economic. And that was one of the reasons that we opposed it, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's an honest point to say it was a political currency, but the price has been a huge one. So if you look at something like, a country like Italy was actually quite successful beforehand. We were a little bit sneering about it in this country. It actually overtook us in the late 80s in terms of GDP per capita and overtook many other countries. But Italy's had absolutely zero growth since it joined the euro.
I mean, at this point, zero growth for 25 years is lost on many people.
That's absolutely extraordinary. If you look at, Greece went through the greatest economic contraction in recorded history, even worse than the Great Depression in the 1930s in the United States. These are not minor flaws.
And
so you can say it's primarily political, and it's a heavy price to pay.
And finished up being told what their tax rates were to be, how much they can spend on their hospitals by foreign administrators of the euro, and the home of the birthplace of democracy had lost it completely.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's a loss of sovereignty, and if it made you a lot richer, maybe that'd be worth it. But if it makes you a lot poorer, then it's a serious question.
Well, you've lost your freedom and you've lost money as well.
It's not a fantastic deal.
It was a great escape for us, wasn't it? Not joining the euro was a great escape.
Oh, I mean, it was probably Gordon Brown's best decision. Not to join the euro.
Well, there we are.
Although there is an interesting argument that having us inside with the city would have crashed it.
Yeah, not a very positive way of looking at things, though. Well, there we are. When somebody from the Daily Telegraph says Gordon Brown got something right, that really is interesting. Well, that's it from me tonight. I'm back with you live, of course, at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. Don't go anywhere, as Jacob Rees-Mogg will be appearing on your screens in just a few minutes' time. But first, we'll get the all-important weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Thorntree here for GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. 2023 was a wetter than average year for the vast majority of us, and 2024 has started off on a relatively similar theme. We've got this band of rain sweeping its way across the majority of the UK. We'll start falling as snow over higher ground areas of Scotland as it pushes into the colder air ahead of it. Some travel disruption is possible overnight with strong winds developing across southern coastal areas of England and for Shetland and Orkney as well. Temperatures in the south will be relatively mild, dropping down to around 11-12 degrees Celsius, but some frost is possible for Scotland first thing on Tuesday. That band of rain will push its way northwards, eventually stalling across the far northern Isles. Other southern eastern areas should see some brighter spells developing for the bank holiday here, but there's more rain on the cards for England, Wales, perhaps into the far southeast of Northern Ireland, eventually spreading into the far south of Scotland as well. So some localised flooding is possible during Tuesday. Temperatures generally ranging between 8 and 13 degrees Celsius, but probably feeling colder due to the strength of the winds. One of those areas of low pressure does eventually clear its way off towards the continent, but we've got another one that is lingering to northwest of the UK as we head into Wednesday. Still with some persistent rainfall for parts of Shetland and Orkney, some strong gales here as well. Further brisk westerly winds pushing in showers for the rest of the UK. Most of those showers frequent in the west and heavy at times. Some brighter spells perhaps for eastern areas. Showers turning fewer and further between as we head to the second half of the week. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you